Hey everyone, a couple weeks ago we released a video talking about some unexpected things that we discovered at Gaming Curios while leveling through the beta, and the response on that video has been phenomenal. Now, with the level cap raised to 70 and more time for us to chew through the content, I figured we'd make a part 2 to that video after sinking 30 more hours in the game myself. Some of these things will be confirming some assumptions that we had when the beta first started, and some other things will be new things that I discovered through my journey to 70. Disclaimer, however, any of these things mentioned here in this video are bound to change. The game is still in beta and is changing constantly every day, so if we do mention something here, it may or may not be the case that it is gonna be on release, but it might be that the devs didn't have the chance to give them a look and remove or delay them yet. So with that in mind, let's get into the video. First, let's mention things that we talked about in part 1 and are surprisingly still in the beta. The first one being the Badges of Justice dailies in Shatrat. Quick reminder, later in the game in TBC in patch 2.3, the NPC Wind Trader Zareem has been added and used to give different dailies every day that would have you kill the last boss of a random heroic dungeon and would reward you with 2 Badges of Justice. In the previous video, I said that the NPC may be here, but it's not certain that he does indeed give any quests, but after reaching level 70, I can confirm that he indeed does give dailies, and they do reward 2 badges just like they used to back in the day. Furthermore, there's a forum post on the official Blizzard forums where they list all known issues in the beta. This post hasn't been updated in a couple weeks, however, so we can't 100% rely on it. But this NPC, or the dailies he gives, are nowhere to be seen in this post. So it does look like we will get to do these dailies every day on release to accelerate our Badges of Justice collection process. Pretty neat and a welcome feature in my opinion. Another thing we mentioned in the previous video was raid testing, and how there was an NPC alluding to the possibility of having raids being tested eventually. As a reminder, the first few raids of Classic WoW, those being Molten Core, Blackwing Lair, and Ankh-Raj, were never tested to keep them in a way novel for players. The devs quickly changed their philosophy on that when they saw how quickly and easily players were chewing through the raiding content, and did do raid testing for Naxxramas or Zul'Gurub, for example. And it turns out that future raids in Classic, be it in TBC or eventually Wrath of the Lich King, will indeed be tested every step of the way. Blizzard released a blue post giving a testing schedule for all of Karazhan, Gruul's Lair, and McTheridan's Lair. This shows a will to make the raids more tuned for modern players, as mentioned during interviews and during their presentation on BlizzConline. And then we have the level cap being raised to 70, the maximal level of Burning Crusade. This is interesting because again, in the Classic WoW beta, the level was never raised to max. In fact, it was limited to 40. Again, probably to keep the endgame novel for players. And with the level being raised to 70 on the beta, this shows a philosophy shift and a will to really test everything in the game, regardless of if it spoils the endgame or not for players. Let's now talk about some new things. First, Primal Nether and the NPC Geras. For those who don't know, Primal Nether is a valuable reagent used to create many powerful items. Sometimes items that will last you all the way to Tempest Keep or even Black Temple. This went through so many changes in the beta that it was quite hard to keep up with. But when the beta first released, this used to work the exact same way it did all the way at the end of the expansion originally, where Geras, the first Badges of Justice vendor, sold Primal Nether and they were freely tradable between players. A few weeks or so after the beta released, Primal Nether has then been changed to being bind on pickup, but still sold from the NPC for Badges of Justice. And then recently, Primal Nether has been completely removed from the NPC, and if you do manage to find it through other means, you'll find that it is still bind on pickup. How it worked originally in TBC was that in patch 2.0, Primal Nether was bind on pickup and not sold from that vendor. And then in patch 2.1, it was added to him for 15 Badges of Justice, but it was still bind on pickup. And then later in patch 2.4, it has been made freely tradable, probably as a wish to stop the guessing game between players as to how much those are really worth, and finally give it an actual value on the auction house. It's interesting that Blizzard wants to go perfectly progressive mode for this particular item. I guess it will release the way it is right now on the beta, and then it will be added to the Badges of Justice vendor in phase 2. Next, we have a small trick that is still working in the beta as of now, but its future is questionable. In Classic WoW currently, you can get through any locked doors by using a small trick. If you manage to die by pulling mobs near a locked door, or by simply deleting your Hearthstone and hitting unstuck, you can get through the doors on ghost form and then resurrect on the other side. And since there's always a lever behind locked doors, you can then open it for your group, for example. This is double useful in TBC for entering dungeons like Shattered Halls, for example, which requires a long quest chain to get the key for, or Shadow Labyrinth, which requires you to get a key behind the last boss in Setek Halls, and only one person in your group can get the key. It would also work for Alcatraz if not for the fact that you automatically get resurrected below if you end up dying there. Well, this trick still works in TBC, but its future is questionable. Here's why. Dying near a dungeon door and coming back in ghost form no longer allows you to go through the door, unless you log off and log back in and keep your forward key pressed. It's weird how this works currently, and this might show that Blizzard have their radar on this and wants to prevent players from doing this. So for now, this still works, but it may or may not get fixed eventually. Next up, we have guild banks. Surprisingly, those are currently disabled on the beta. A couple days ago, we released a video where we mentioned how useful guild banks are, not only for guilds themselves, but also for individual players to get an incredibly large amount of inventory space for a really good value. 100 gold for 98 spaces. Well, at least for the first tab. It turns out that guild banks currently aren't enabled in the beta. As a reminder, guild banks were only added in patch 2.3 to avoid players from account sharing to manage their guild's bank characters. And this kinda reminds me of the keyring in Classic. The keyring was added in patch 1.11 in vanilla, and in Classic it took forever for them to add it to the game, all the way till phase 3 I believe. So it's hard to say whether guild banks will suffer a similar fate, where Blizzard wants to release them later similar to how they were released in patch 2.3 originally, or if they just didn't manage to have them yet on the beta. To go back to that known issues blue post, guild banks are not mentioned there, so we'll have to wait and see. Either way, I think we can all agree that we really do want guild banks at launch and not delayed, and I did make a bug report for that. Next up, we have Warlocks being able to teleport players inside dungeons. From what I heard, this is currently not working on the beta, but it's kinda weird. The teleport does go off, but nothing happens. This suggests that this might be a bug and that Warlocks will probably be able to teleport other players inside dungeons if the other player is outside. But again, this was only added in patch 2.4 originally, and there's no way to really know Blizzard's intentions on this as of now. Character templates. Those were speculated to be the same as the level 58 boosted characters that you would get from buying a boost in Classic TBC. And it turns out that recently, Blizzard made a whole lot of changes to them, mainly adding a small quest line introducing you to your class and your talents and the way the game works in general, which pretty much confirms that the character templates that we get to create on the beta are what a player will get once he or she purchases a character boost. So to go over this quickly, you're put halfway through level 58, close to 59, and you're given a full set of green gear similar to the gear that you would get normally from questing at that level. You also get a free 60% blue mount and 25 gold and a bunch of other small items that will help you depending on your class. We still don't know the price of the character boost, however, and obviously there's a big outroar going on saying that this isn't the spirit of Classic, that you shouldn't get to pay with real life money to skip a huge part of the leveling process, and that this could lead to more microtransactions being injected into the game. Some people agree with that and some don't. Let us know what you think about character boosts in the comments. World buffs. Those obviously weren't going to work from the get-go as the game is based on patch 2.4 and some world buffs have been made to be ineffective above level 63 during patch 2.1, but players were concerned about some other more obscure world buffs that weren't mentioned to be affected by the 2.1 change, namely Songflower Serenade or Warchief's Blessing. Blizzard did put up a blue post saying that no matter what the world buff is, it will be purged at the start of raid encounters. Blizzard also mentioned that they plan on preserving them in the Classic era vanilla servers, but they plan on moving away from them in Burning Crusade Classic. And later on, in a blue post regarding Classic Era, Blizzard mentioned that they are going to be adding an item to save your world buffs and enable them once you enter a raid in Classic Era. This will make world buffs easier to get and keep without the fear of getting them purged or needing to log off your character for days to preserve them before a raid. A step in the right direction, although some players still think that world buffs are just too powerful to be even used in the first place in Classic Era, and they should just be removed altogether. And finally, we have AOE leveling and farming. With AOE cap being a thing in TBC, many players thought that AOE dungeon leveling for mages would be impossible to do in TBC. However, after a bunch of testing, players proved that AOE leveling is still super valuable, some scoring upwards of 300k XP per hour, which is more than any dungeon cleave or questing method could ever achieve. So mage AOE leveling is still a thing, and it does look like the world first level 70 player in Classic TBC will probably be a mage. It's hard to say whether Blizzard will be willingly fighting AOE farming and leveling at this point. They haven't in Classic, and even if they do, players proved even back in the day that Protection Paladin AOE farming is even better than Mage AOE farming, so Blizzard would have to nerf both classes if they were to take action, and I highly doubt they would do that personally. So with that, this was 10 unexpected things that I discovered while leveling to 70 on the beta. Let me guys know if you learned a thing or two here and if I forgot some important stuff. The beta is still going on and we're gonna get to test raids by the time this video is posted. I'm really looking forward to that and I'll keep you posted on how hard or enjoyable raids are in Classic TBC. So make sure to subscribe to the Gaming Curious channel to not miss that. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.